Hi, everyone. Good evening. We're almost at the end of the day today, so I hope you're able to stay with me. But through this day, I've really enjoyed the conference. I've seen some amazing, insightful discussions that have happened so far. And we've also seen multiple approaches to how we can make the fashion and textile supply chain more sustainable. But today, I'm here to particularly talk about how we can build a sustainable supply chain through innovation. So, I'm Saatchi Doshi. I work as a supply chain analyst for Fashion for Good. Before I begin my presentation, I'd quickly like to introduce Fashion for Good. Fashion for Good is a global innovation platform. We're headquartered in Amsterdam with an overseas presence in Asia. We started out in 2017 with the help of the Loudest Foundation as a pre-competitive space for the various industry stakeholders to come together and really decarbonize the supply chain through the help of innovation. In the last 5 years, we've scouted supply chain innovations right across the supply chain, right from raw material processing, production to end of use and various technologies that happen along the supply chain. And through the scouting of these innovations, we've developed a proprietary landscape of understanding what are the technologies that currently exist in the market. These are some of the partners who've really supported us through this journey. We've been lucky to have some major brands and manufacturers work with us together in this particular journey and really come together and provide their view and speak on behalf of the various different aspects and stakeholders of the textile industry. So, just starting off with a quick graph, which I assume most of the people in this room must have seen. When we talk about the supply chain and when we talk about the major hotspots of emissions across the supply chain, we can see that a majority of them are made up by tier 3 and tier 2 production, which is raw material and processing. So this raw material processing and production is not only limited to fibers or fabrics or trims, it involves essentially all of the materials that we're currently using. And these are some of the biggest areas of impact currently in the textile and apparel supply chain. But what we've also seen is that the biggest areas of impact are also the most difficult to unpack. When we see so much innovation coming forward in these areas on one hand, we also see the various challenges that these innovators face in being able to scale and implement their technologies in the supply chain over here. But there is still a huge amount of solutions that are coming up. There's various innovations from the grassroots level right up until corporate innovation that is taking place, which is the good news. And as we can see over here, we've supported 159 innovators in the last 5 years. Some of them that are also present in this room. We had Spinova, who spoke earlier in the day today. We have SmartX, who's actually presenting outside in the booth, as well as Reverse Resources. Each of these innovators have come up with technologies that can be implemented in the apparel supply chain. And out of these 159, around 48, which makes roughly 1/3 of our innovators, have been able to commercially implement their technology and generate revenue from the textile and apparel supply chain. And they've also been able to create a total of 180 implementation cases across these verticals. While we acknowledge the successes, it would be remiss if I didn't talk about the challenges or the missed opportunity that exists over here. When we do have successes, we also need to understand the various challenges that these innovators have faced or are facing in terms of implementing their solution in the supply chain. Innovations will never scale if they're not integrated with the corporate machine. So far, innovations, the validation of innovation, the piloting of innovation usually happens between brands and innovators, and suppliers really come in at a later stage, and there is not enough data that's passed on to them. And that is really harmful to the scaling of innovation, and it really slows down the acceleration towards decarbonizing the industry because suppliers do not have the right data to be able to make these decisions. They are not empowered enough to understand more about what this space actually looks like. Building on that, because Fashion for Good is positioned in a place where we are trying to unite the global ecosystem of brands, manufacturers, and innovators, we've been lucky enough to gain feedback from all of the various industry stakeholders to understand what are the various challenges that they're facing in terms of implementing innovation. If I may start with a supplier perspective, number one, suppliers don't have access or even knowledge about the various kinds of innovations that exist in the industry. The only innovations that they're exposed to are usually through bigger solution providers, and that's a very limited amount of knowledge that they're exposed to. Secondly, and this is something that has been alluded all throughout the day in various panel discussions, is that suppliers also face a disproportionate risk while having to adopt these technologies. And that risk or that onus of adopting these technologies should not lie just on a supplier itself. From an innovator perspective, they are not able to identify who are the right suppliers or who is the right fit for them in the textile and apparel supply chain. And because of this, and because suppliers are very often left out of the validation aspect of innovation, we realize that what we really need to do is identify and underpin the supplier's role in this particular supply chain, in this particular acceleration of innovation. Suppliers need access to vetted technologies. They need access to technologies, and they need the data that can prove that there is a particular ROI that exists. They need to understand what is the technical fit, and this cannot be achieved just with the help of an innovator or with the help of a supplier or with a brand. They need different stakeholders in the industry, like engineering firms, consulting firms, to come together and support them in understanding what is the technical fit an innovator has in a particular supply chain. What is the impact of actually adopting these technologies? Are you adopting, and this is something I was discussing with somebody who was a speaker yesterday, and they said, are you adopting innovation for innovation's sake, or are you actually solving a problem? And that's the sort of information that manufacturers need to know before they move forward. From brands, suppliers need their key buyers, as you must also know that quite often a supplier, majorly, even though they work for different brands, they have 2 to 3 brands that make up a huge chunk of their revenue. We need these brands to come forward and signal some intent or commitment in the form of offtake agreements to come and support these suppliers in the adoption of these technologies. And on the basis of all of this feedback that we've received, we decided to build a targeted approach for suppliers known as the Strategic Supplier Initiative. As you can see, as Fashion for Good, we really have access to all of the market-ready innovators, and we have a huge partner group that exists currently. We really now want to understand how we can support suppliers further in implementing these innovative technologies. And the first aspect of it is the education, the introductions to these various innovations that exist in the market, the access to the validation results in terms of what were the results out of a particular pilot. And that's something that we really want most suppliers to be able to gain access to. The next steps include, of course, feasibility through commercial, technical, and impact assessment procedures, and access to financing. We want to support suppliers with a landscape of the different organizations that are working in the financing space, some of whom we've heard from earlier in the day, like the Good Fashion Fund and the Apparel Impact Institute. And of course, lastly, we need a localized operational support because adopting innovation comes with a mighty variety of challenges, especially local challenges, and that's where you really need the localized operational support. In the end, all I would like to say is we really need to build a system where we have acknowledgement and a shared responsibility, a shared risk, and a collaborative approach amongst all of the various stakeholders, and doesn't fall on the shoulders of just one stakeholder. So I'll be here. If you want to get in touch with me, please feel free to send me an email or meet me over here. But thank you for having me. This has been a lovely forum. Thank you.